More and more bizarre events are taking place designed to divide American society, inflame fear and hatred and division, and there's probably going to be a whole lot more in the future. On today's episode of Behind the Deep State, we have another special treat for you, an interview with my friend and mentor and colleague, William F. Jasper. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss it. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Behind the Deep State. I'm your host, Alex Newman, and with us in studio today here at the New American Studios is my friend and colleague, William F. Jasper. He is the other senior editor here at the New American Magazine. Him and me and Rebecca make up the trio of senior editors. And Bill has been doing this for a long time. I won't say exactly how long, but a lot longer than me. And I consider him to be one of the best, if not the best, investigative journalists in America. If you haven't been reading his articles, you should. They're just absolutely incredible, so well researched, so thorough, so clear and concise. And he has spent a lot of time studying the involvement of federal agencies in some of these attacks that we've seen. In fact, he did more research into the Oklahoma City bombing than probably anybody else on the face of the earth, including law enforcement. I mean, senior people in law enforcement, even the former director of national intelligence, contacted him for his information for his own purposes. So it's a real treat to have Bill with us. Bill, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started on talking about the federal role and so many of the things that we have seen, these attacks, these subversive movements, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Bill. You've been at the helm of the New American for a long time, you and Gary. How'd you get involved? What's it been like to be doing this for decades, and where are we relative to where we were a few decades ago?
Well, thank you for having me on the program, Alex. Well, it's a long story. I've been doing this for 45 years now, and I was typical of many students in college in the early 70s. The Vietnam War is going on, the sexual revolution, Woodstock generation, all of that stuff is happening. And I was caught up in some of that, but thankfully in my case, I had parents who were very solid, devout Christians and devout patriots. And even though I went a little bit askew because of all the influences in college and thinking myself very brilliant at the time, because as college students, as you get exposed to all the new socialist and leftist agenda, even back then, of course, that's where it was really starting to ferment. My parents still had an influence in my life. They were both World War II veterans. My dad was a paratrooper and the 82nd Airborne, Battle of the Bulge and D-Day and all of that. My mom was an Army nurse. And so anyway, they were trying to make sense of all the turmoil that was happening in the 60s and 70s at that time. And they got involved with the John Birch Society. And when I heard that, I go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. I've heard only bad things. Birch Society, they're racist. They're Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazi types, and my parents are good people. They wouldn't get involved with something like that. I'm going to have to educate them and show them the error of their ways. So I started reading the literature from the Birch Society on economics, on the Constitution, on political theory, all those things. I go, oh, this isn't what I thought. These are pretty reasonable propositions and ideas that they're talking about. And the more I read, they gave me tons of books and pamphlets and things. I go, whoa, I've been very badly misled about all of this. And I began seeing how the movement to destroy the family and Christian morality was really at the base of everything that was happening in the revolutions in the United States, to remove the supports which are fundamental to freedom, which is the family and morality, which, if those are strong, you don't need a huge, big, authoritarian, totalitarian government to keep order. If you destroy that and create chaos, then you create the vacuum that draws in an all-powerful government. And so I realized if I want to have freedom, I better support those who are trying to restore our constitutional government, Christian morality. And so I decided to change course after I got out of college, and I went to work for the Birch Society, first as a researcher. And while I was doing that, I was also working as an undercover operative in Southern California inside the Communist Party, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Communist Party Marxist-Leninists, the Socialist Workers' Party, and a number of other revolutionary groups that were trying to overthrow our government. And I worked with a number of congressmen, for instance, Congressman Larry McDonald, a Democrat of Georgia, who is the most courageous and important congressman in the 1970s and 80s in terms of trying to restore our republic. And John Ashbrook of Ohio, but also with a lot of top military and intelligence people who were seeing how the country was being destroyed. Admiral Thomas Moore, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Patton, the son of General Patton from World War II, and a number of other people like that. And then I began in 1978 and 79 writing for our magazines, the precursors to the New American, and doing investigative reporting. And so that's been going on now for better part of a half century.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing work that you do, Bill. There's been an increase, it seems to me, in bizarre occurrences happening. We had not long ago that mass shooting in Buffalo. It came out that the individual involved, who self-identified with the authoritarian left, had actually been in regular communication with a former retired FBI agent. We saw the Governor Whitmer thing, where it came out in court that basically this was an FBI plot from start to finish. They ended up acquitting the guys because, what are you going to charge them for collaborating with the FBI on a criminal plot that the FBI came up with? We've seen a lot of that. Of course, we saw the January 6th thing and the clown show hearings. It looks to me very obvious that there was federal involvement. I want to talk about one area that you have explored in more depth than probably anyone, at least anybody I can think of, and that is the Oklahoma City bombing. Obviously, we weren't told the truth by the media, by the federal government, and that became apparent to you pretty early on as you were digging into this. So we spoke yesterday a little bit about how that bomb, allegedly from the truck, could not have possibly taken down that building in the way that was presented to the American people. Tell us a little bit about your investigation, some of the lies that were told. How did you find out that they were lying to us? And what were your ultimate conclusions? What really happened that day?
Well, it's important not just from a historical curiosity viewpoint, but I think understanding Oklahoma City and the lies that were promulgated there by the federal government on the big cover-up and what actually happened is foundational to understanding what's happening today. And you already mentioned the Governor Whitmer kidnap plot. Many of your viewers or listeners may not be aware of this because the mainstream media has largely covered this up. But in October of 2020, all of the news hits us right before the elections that this terrible plot had been foiled by the FBI of these Michigan militia to kidnap the governor, the sitting governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and to kill her and to take over the state capitol. And so this was played all over the media, top to bottom, 24/7, for days right before the election. And Governor Whitmer came out and said it was President Trump who enabled this, who inspired this. And so it was an obvious attempt by the deep state intelligence agency, including the FBI at the center of this, to pin this on Donald Trump. What turned out to be, and as you mentioned in the trial, and we knew even before the trial, but in the trial it came out, these guys were acquitted because it was entrapment. The whole thing had been set up by the FBI. They took some guys who weren't even interested in doing this. They coaxed them and kept prodding them, paying them, doing everything. They got all of the materials, the weapons. They paid for their travel and expenses and everything. And so the jury said, this obvious case of entrapment, and they acquitted them. But the media has been for the last year and a half with the January 6th insurrection, been playing that up, and now we have the committee doing its fake hearings. What is important to realize is that the head of the FBI who carried out the fake kidnapping plot, Stephen D'Antonio, he was put in charge then of Washington, D.C., and he carried out that there. So this is exactly a replay of what we saw in Oklahoma City. So I mentioned at the start that the first thing that set me off was when I saw the Oklahoma City bomb on the news. I decided to go down there. I called General Parton. He is the foremost expert on explosives. He said, no, there had to have been explosives inside. And I went through some of that. So the other explosives, that required additional co-conspirators, and not just homeboys that have no experience. It took people with expertise to place the explosives inside the building.
And my guess is you probably can't just any person off the street just walk into an ATF building, huh?
Right. So we spent tremendous amount of time going into getting all the other kinds of expertise on that, getting witnesses, and there's lots of other video footage that we've made reference to in the past and that is available, showing that they brought out other unexploded devices from the building that didn't go off. And in fact, the news reported it at the time, and then all of a sudden it went down the memory hole, but it's still been preserved. There are those news clips showing them bringing out the additional unexploded devices. So additional explosive devices, foreknowledge, prior knowledge. So we knew that federal agencies inside the Murrah building in Oklahoma City had been warned that there was going to be a bombing on that day. They didn't come in. The ATF didn't, and the other federal agents didn't come in, but they allowed everybody else to be. The children came in, and so that was another whole area that we spent a tremendous amount of time on documenting and going into, and that is available at the New American. So there was prior knowledge, multiple explosives. Along with the multiple explosives is the seismic evidence. The New American is the only news organization that pursued that. There is a seismograph downtown in Oklahoma City and one at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. And we went and got the seismic readouts from those and talked to Professor Brown at the University of Oklahoma, who is in charge of the seismic evidence there. And we went through it. He said, you're the only news organization that's done this. And the seismic evidence shows that there were multiple explosions. Again, that was covered up, but as a result of our coverage at the New American, it caused the Oklahoma Geological Society to hold a major hearing on this and a public thing. And I was recognized there at the meeting for causing this. And anyway, so they had Dr. Brown and then another expert debating the issue, and finally it did kind of get out. But there were other things as well. The eyewitnesses, we saw that there were multiple witnesses showing that Timothy McVeigh, driving the Ryder truck down from Kansas, was in a convoy of vehicles, and that he had another passenger in his Ryder truck. Multiple witnesses on that the whole way. We tracked it all the way down, went all the way up to Kansas, talked with everybody up there, talked with the motel owner where he stayed, and the people that were staying with him at the hotel, the pizza guy who delivered pizza to the whole conspiracy there. So we had multiple individuals involved, but the Clinton administration, the FBI and the DOJ, just like our DOJ today under Merrick Garland, and the FBI under now Christopher Wray, are corrupt. Back then, Janet Reno and Louis Freeh were completely corrupt and complicit in covering all of this up. So we knew that there were multiple individuals involved. Why did the federal government not want to go after these other people? Our investigation showed that because a number of them would lead back to the DOJ and to the CIA and to the FBI. And they didn't want all of that coming out, so they suppressed it. But we found many other problems as well. It wasn't just Timothy McVeigh and his Army buddy, Terry Nichols, but there was a group of white supremacists, in this case, genuine white supremacists, at a place called Elohim City. It was a semi-religious, professedly Christian, but not Christian, organization, a commune out in Oklahoma, in the rural Oklahoma area, where we had a lot of agent provocateurs coming through there regularly. People like Dennis Mahon of the White Aryan Resistance and the Ku Klux Klan. Timothy McVeigh came through there. A mysterious German guy by the name of Andreas Strassmeyer, who our FBI, working with the German government, had brought over here, and he was training the folks at Elohim City in explosives and firearms. And we put him on, Andreas Strassmeyer, on the cover of the magazine, really started promoting that. I was doing a lot of radio and television on that. And here they were scouring the whole country to find everybody who was involved with this, but they didn't even bother to go interview him. And then they allowed him to slip out of the United States through Mexico and go back to Germany. And then they said, oh, we better interview him. and so they sent a couple agents over to Germany. I said, yeah, we interviewed him, and he said he didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, that settles it.
That settled it. Meanwhile, they're rounding up all these other people, just like we see with January 6th. Mm-hmm. And with January 6th, they're allowing Ray Epps and all these other folks, like Scaffold Guy, Red-Face Guy, all these different people who were central to the stirring up things, all the illegal activities at the Capitol on January 6th. They're letting them go scot-free and focusing on people that really did nothing
vandalism, trespassing, move some papers here and there.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I guess right after the Oklahoma City bombing, just like after 9/11, they had this massive legislation that they introduced that began turning the massive security apparatus inward at Americans. And
yes, and so at that time, so it was very difficult to get any other news agencies, conservative, otherwise, to cover this because they were very fearful of the Clinton administration, which was Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and their gang were very aggressive in going after people. And so Bill Clinton said in his one of his flights on Air Force One, where he had the press corps with him, he said, after the 94 elections, the midterms, where the Republicans took back control of the House, he said things weren't going well for us. And he said, and then Oklahoma City happened, and it changed everything. It did, because I know at the time there was a lot of feeling against the overreach of the federal government. They were very oppressive things, so they wanted in the House and in the Senate to clip the wings of all these federal agencies that had done Waco and Ruby Ridge and whatnot. And when Oklahoma City happened, all of a sudden everybody's afraid. I don't want to sound like I'm anti-government. Timothy McVeigh was anti-government, and so anyone who speaks in terms of oppressive federal regulation are somehow ideationally connected to Timothy McVeigh. In fact, Time Magazine coined that term, ideational co-conspirators. If you are against the federal government's overreach, then you're an ideational co-conspirator with Timothy McVeigh.
It's amazing how that only applies to conservatives, right? Because you could be a communist, a socialist, and you could be an ideational co-conspirator with Joseph Stalin or Vladimir Lenin or Chairman Mao or Adolf Hitler. But no, we don't talk about those. Or the guy, the Bernie Sanders supporter who shot 4 congressmen that we don't hear about anymore. We're pretty much out of time, Bill, but I want to ask you, what's the moral of the story? I mean, obviously, if some weirdo comes to your meeting and says, hey, we should bomb something or kill somebody, everybody, obviously, all right, that guy's probably a Fed or a confidential informant or some leftist trying to make conservatives look bad. But what's the moral of the story? How do we deal with these sorts of subversive deep state operations?
Well, first and foremost, you just pointed to is somebody's at your meeting, joining your group, whatever it may be, whether it's a pro-life group, a pro-Second Amendment group, property rights or whatnot, and they're really pushing like Ray Epps did at the Washington
into
D.C.
the Capitol, guys.
Into the Capitol. People started going, Fed.
Yeah, right.
They recognize okay, he's going to try to discredit. It's called discredit from within. And that's a Saul Alinsky tactic, a communist Nazi tactics, infiltrating and discredit from within, and lead people off from effective counteraction into something that will be condemned by the public and that will subject you to prosecution and persecution. And so, look, we're still at the point where it's getting very late in the game, but we still have pieces of our constitutional left. We can still work together with fellow citizens peacefully, doing those things that we are really required by duty to do, which is to wrest back control that we have ceded to the government by our inaction and abdication. We have to get the government back into its constitutional limitations and chains. And that means getting our representatives at the state level and our representatives at the national level to stop funding and to abolish many of these agencies. So it's a long battle, and we have to be committed to it. Our enemies have been committed to it for over a century now. And if we are not equally committed, we're going to lose all our freedom.
Yeah. And I want you to be realistic with us, Bill. I don't want you to sugarcoat anything. Don't feel like you need to be optimistic or pessimistic. But where are we realistically? Do you think the deep state can be stopped? Do you think they're too powerful? What do you think the prospects are? Are you hopeful, optimistic, pessimistic?
Well, I have always tried to be realistic. So I say resistance is not futile. It is not inevitable that we will be assimilated. If you're talking in Borg terms, Star Trek terms that people are familiar with. The psychological operation is to convince us that either resistance is futile because they're too strong, the deep state, they're too powerful, they're too rich, they have control of too many of our institutions, or the people that have already been brought along is that it's a good thing. We need to have the nanny state take care of us because things are too difficult these days. No, we have to reject that, and it's getting more and more difficult. I don't want to sugarcoat it. We are perilously close to losing it all. We see every new power that the government assumes, we lose more freedom. And there comes a point where you've lost so much of your freedom, as we see now with everything that's happening. If you can get in trouble now for just saying or thinking the wrong thing, you don't even have to say the wrong thing. If they look at you and say, you don't seem to be agreeing, you seem to be having a very judgmental attitude, then you're going to be so your social credit score, as in communist China, will put you in the doghouse. And
Homeland Security just last year put out terrorism alerts saying that people who believe that the election was rigged or people who believe that the COVID stuff was a lie are domestic terror threats. They're not messing around
some
anymore.
of the J6 defendants were asked by the judge, do you believe that the election was stolen? Like, for instance, if you still believe that then you don't get any kind of bail or anything. So
hey, that's a thought crime. How dare you?
Yeah.
It's scary. I agree, Bill. And before we let you go, just give us some of your quick thoughts on effective counteraction. I mean, what are some effective things that people can do who do want to preserve freedom?
Well,
and why should they? I mean, I don't want to be the one that gets rounded up by the government. I don't want to be the one that sticks my head out. I mean, why should we get involved?
Yes. Well, those that say I don't want to stick my head out or I don't want to get on a list you're eventually you're either going to have to be a total coward and submit to everything that they want, or you're going to have to stand up and say, this far, I will not allow it to go any further. And so what do you do? How do you take effective action? Well, first of all, in order to take effective action, you have to know what's going on. You have to know some truth, some facts, what actually is happening, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. I think we do better job than anybody else of looking into that at the New American, thenewamerican.com. You can go there on a daily basis to our website, subscribe to our print magazine. So that's foundational. That's the beginning. You have to first inform yourself. Then you have to give that information to others. But then you have to join together with others in effective action. By ourselves, we're not going to turn this around. We have to join arms, link hands with other people, patriots across the country. And so I recommend, as I've done for the last close to 50 years, is to join and become active in the John Birch Society. Now, if you're at all familiar with what's been happening in the last 4 years, you know that everybody who has stood up and has stood up for America, for our national sovereignty against globalism, has been attacked. What? As a racist, misogynist, as a ethnocentrist, as a white nationalist, white supremacist.
Conspiracy theorist.
As conspiracy theorist. So what does that tell us? That tells us that truth is being attacked, and truth tellers are being attacked. So who has been attacked more than anyone else in the last 50 years? The John Birch Society, if you have a negative impression of them like I did at the beginning, it's because they were recognized by the deep state as the major threat, the major truth tellers who had to be destroyed by all of the demonology that they could throw at them. And so the Birch Society has stood the test of time. They have shown that, hey, you throw everything at us, we're still going to keep coming. And that's what Americans need to do now. They need to harden their attitudes, harden their minds and their hearts, and say, look, go ahead, call me whatever you want. That isn't going to stop me. I'm going to keep coming. We're going to stand up for this country and for our nation and for God, family, and country.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, Bill, but I do think that the smears are having less and less of an effect. I mean, after the deep state spent the last few years demonizing half or more of Americans as all those things.
Well, yes, and particularly, I mean, even black and Hispanic Americans, they call white nationalists. Yeah. So Larry Elder or Candace
Larry
Owens
Elder, the blackface of white supremacy.
All of the black patriots and Hispanic patriots and Asian patriots, they call them white supremacists too. So people go, wait a second.
Yeah, I'll never forget the SPLC called my friend who happens to be a Cherokee Indian, married to an Indian. She's the leader of the anti-Indian movement, according to the SPLC. They never mentioned that she's a Cherokee, married to a direct descendant of Sacagawea. You had a Muslim called one of the top 10 anti-Muslim extremists by the SPLC. They ended up having to pay like $4 million. You had Dr. Carol Swain, a wonderful, wonderful lady, demonized as an apologist for white supremacy because she believes in borders. So I do think their verbal tactics are losing their sting, and I think that's maybe why they're moving on to the next phase where they're just trying to criminalize opposition. Well, Bill, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for sharing your insight and your wisdom with our viewers out there. Truly extraordinary. Any final words of wisdom? What's the best place for people to find you? Obviously, thenewamerican.com. Do you have any of the fascist social media sites?
Actually, I'm not active on the social media. I just concentrate on the New American.
Very good.
So,
all right. Well,
I'm on a lot of radio and television programs, but if you keep track of the newamerican.com, you'll be able to follow us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bill. All right, folks, that was William F. Jasper, one of the best journalists on the planet. And I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not just saying that because he's my friend. He really is. He's incredible. Go read his articles. Go read some of that stuff he did on the Oklahoma City bombing. I still get emails from family members. Man, Bill Jasper's article on the lawyers was amazing, or whatever topic it is that he's tackling. It's always good. Go to thenewamerican.com. Share this out with others, folks. And remember, if some weirdo comes to your meeting and says you should bomb something or shoot something or do something illegal, there's a real good chance you're dealing with an agent provocateur, either working for the feds or working with the feds or working with the commies or the Antifas or the whatevers. Don't fall for the trap, guys. It's just critical that we be wise as serpents but harmless as doves during these incredible times that we find ourselves in. Don't be demoralized. keep up the good fight. We really don't have any other option. I mean, losing cannot be an option. It just simply absolutely cannot be. So we got to take that off the table as a possibility and get to work. I'm Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with more, God willing. Until then, God bless you all. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe, hit like, hit that little bell so that you'll be notified whenever we post new videos. And also, please make sure to share this video with your friends. Email's a great way to do it. Remember, there are powerful forces working to steal our freedom and destroy our country. We need to work together, expose those behind the deep state. Otherwise, you can kiss your liberties goodbye.